Hey there, builder. Today we'll be looking at the fundamentals of painting a model car from start to finish. Whether that car is die cast, resin, or plastic, the underlying fundamentals are the same for each. What a better way to start this off than by using AMT's slammer's Chrysler Concorde. This kit is a total of 16 pieces, with 11 of those being the chassis and wheels, so it gives us the ability to really focus on the body and painting. We'll also be applying some decals to the car to see how that can affect the painting process. So first we'll remove the spoiler. I think this car looks a little bit better without it, and we will have a chance to fill in some holes. We won't be doing anything with the chassis, so we will just set it aside for now, along with the one piece of pink windows. So it looks like there are a few spots that will need some attention with molding points. This kit has removable bumpers. There are several reasons why manufacturers will do this. One of them is so that the body has fewer mold lines for you to deal with. If you've ever worked on a one-part body, you may have noticed how there are usually mold lines around the corners of the bumpers due to how the molding process is done. It's a good idea for you to cover any actual holes being filled from the inside. To fill these holes, we will be using Tamiya's white putty. There are many fillers out there, from hobby types to automotive grade fillers. It's up to you what filler you use and what you're comfortable with and what you may have experience with. The white putty does shrink a little bit when drying out, but more on that later. You'll want to try and keep panel lines free of any extra putty while it's still soft. It's easier than trying to clean them out after the putty is hardened, and can also raise the risk of making a mistake. You can now begin to give the body a slight sanding. This will help show additional places that may need filler. When the injection molding is done, occasionally there are parts of a design where the plastic may be a little bit thick, such as on the roof of this car where the attachment points are for the glass. When the plastic cools after the injection, you can get a sink mark in the plastic. A lot of the time, these marks are barely noticeable, but sometimes they can also be quite large. You can use the putty again in an effort to smooth out these sink marks. By applying the putty as flat as you can, it will be slightly less work sanding it down later. While waiting for the putty to dry, you can take care of a few other things on the body, such as burrs, seam lines, and other slight defects. Once you're happy with any repairs, you can glue the bumpers in place so any further work you do on the body keeps everything in place. At this time, it is a very good idea for you to test the body with the chassis. Not all bodies will fit onto a chassis with the front and rear bumpers in place. With this kit, it's not a problem, but if the chassis won't fit with the bumpers in place, you will have to do all your body work and painting as separate pieces. Using a grinder can help give a little space in wheel edges for these lower tires. Scribing can be a very important part of body prep. A good deep scribe means you may not need to use a panel line wash later in your build, depending on the colors that you decide for your body. Scribing should follow the natural angles of the body panels. There are many scribers available from super thin to slightly wider, but I find the back of a hobby blade usually does a pretty good job. Okay, so now you're ready to start sanding. You can begin with a 400 or a 600 grit to knock down the putty. If you use anything lower in grit, you do risk the chance of making some very deep scratches in the plastic or the metal that will be much harder to smooth out later. I have found that the 600 grit is kind of the sweet spot for knocking down power without really roughing up the surface too much. Sanding can be all about the pressure you are using. Using less pressure means less deep scratches in the surface, but it can also mean a lot more work to get a nice flat surface. To sand this off, I am using very little pressure on the sanding sponge to smooth out the softer putty without taking off a lot of plastic from the roof. By using less pressure in areas where there is a lot of complex curves, we are less likely to shave down body lines of the car and instead just smooth out the putty. To achieve a very smooth surface that light can reflect off nicely, you will need to get panel lines smoothed out. If you have one side of a panel line higher than the other, it can really alter how the light reflects once your paint job is complete. An effort to smooth out all the body panels now can make all of our additional steps a lot easier later. You can use a 600 grit or even a 1000 grit if you know most of the body is in decent shape already. Connection points between parts that have been glued can be a spot where you will find a lot of unevenness. It's a good idea to give these areas some really good attention to ensure that they are even and smoothed out. Be cautious around spots that have purposeful protrusions, like door handles, water sprayers on hoods, and gas doors with finger openings. Don't forget those wheel arches. They can have pretty sharp areas where the body mold creates a seam. Always a good idea to keep your workspace clean and free of debris and dust. Once you're happy with everything, you can clean off your body to get ready for actual painting. I'm using some alcohol here, but you can also use soap and water, run it under a tap, clean it in a bucket, whatever works for you. This helps to remove any agents from the molding process and helps to remove any oils from your hands while you've been working on it. So primer. You have many choices when it comes to primers. Primer in a can, primer for an airbrush, primer that is ready to spray, primer that you mix. It's totally up to you to work with whatever works for you and with whatever is in your budget. What you do need to consider with your primer is how will it affect your color, so your choice of primer is important here. If you use a black primer with a lighter color, it can really bring out your panel lines nicely, but many gloss colors are difficult to paint over a black. Black can also be used with a silver over top to give a nice base for candy colors. A white base can make certain colors like yellows, blues, and reds really pop, And pink can be a great base color for reds to give you a really deep color effect. Primer can be a really personal choice, so experiment with different brands and different types to see what works best for you. In this instance, we did do some body work, and so a great primer is usually quite helpful to pick out any imperfections in the bodywork. To me, a fine primer gives us a nice surface to work with, and you'll have little need for sanding before applying additional layers of paint. Spraying a light coat first will help you to see any defects there may be in the body and in our bodywork. Using a spray can or an airbrush has many different abilities involved. With a spray can, you're not able to control the airflow or the amount of paint coming out, so you will need to work on how you move your hand for a quick pass or a longer pass. Also, how close you are to the body or how far away will also give you very different results. Getting used to a particular brand can help you get more proficient with the spray can. With an airbrush, you have a little more control over airflow and paint flow, but you need to understand how paint thickness and consistency can really alter how it lays down. Both methods have positive and negative aspects, and you will need to experiment with different methods to figure out what works best for you. Personally, I love the laziness of a spray can, no mixing, no cleanup, ready to go right away, but I also like the broad range of colors that you can get and the ability to mix paints to create your own colors. So because of this, I tend to use a can for primers and clear coats, and then I'll use an airbrush for different body colors. We will give the primer a few hours to dry and then inspect our previous work. If we did a good job with the sanding, then there should be little that we need to do other than some touch-ups and maybe a little sanding in a spot or two. Once you're happy with everything and fixed any errors, you can go ahead and give a heavier second coat of primer. Inspect that again and be sure there are no dust spots or maybe globs of paint. If you do find anything, you can use a 3000 grit to smooth it out and either coat it again or move on to the next stage. It is always a good idea to brush off your body before painting to ensure there's no dust or debris that has settled on your body. For color, I'm going with a yellow acrylic from Vallejo. I really like the Vallejo, but I find that they can be tough to airbrush as they tend to dry right in the airbrush, making it difficult at times. But I really like a lot of the colors that they offer. After your first coat, give it a little dry time and inspect for any imperfections in the paint. Fix as necessary, using a high grit sanding sponge is to not go too deep in the surrounding area. Second coat is applied like the first. Even passes and overlapping lines help to give a very consistent look to the paint over the body. There's so many paint brands available and so many different styles of paint that it would be impossible to go over all of them in one video. The purpose behind the base coat is to give a uniform look over the entire body. You should not be able to see the primer through any of the paint, and the color should look the same on the roof, the sides, and in all the hard to reach spots like wheel arches and the bottom of the bumpers and side skirt. Depending on the paint used, this can be achieved in as little as 2 coats or as many coats as needed if you're using a paint that's a little thinner. 10 coats of the base color is not unheard of for a very thin color like yellow or white. If you are interested in actual brand attributes, I would suggest using the YouTube search for that brand, and you will see plenty of videos with tests from users like Barbados Rex to give you an idea of how a brand of paint can be applied. If you're not using a gloss paint and you will be applying decals, it is a good idea to put on a light layer of clear to help give the decals a smooth surface to adhere to. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into how to apply decals. If you do want a deeper dive into decals, you can check out this link at the top to see James's deep dive into decal work. The decal work on this build is to help show you how decals can affect your clear coats and the final look of your build. Once our decals have been given enough time to dry, we can begin the clear coating. As with paint, there are many options available for clear coats. For ease of use, a spray can or clear from a jar is an easy way to go, but you can go with a harder coating using a hobby 2K clear or even an automotive 2K clear. These can take a little more effort, mixing and experience to know what works for you, and will need to try out what's available to you to see what works best for your style of building. Your first layer of clear should be thin to be sure it doesn't hurt the decals. Clear coats can go on hot and can lead to wrinkling of the decals or even the paint underneath. If you are unsure of how a clear will react with a paint color, then it's a good idea to test it out first using styrene spoons so that you are not jeopardizing all your hard work. Once you give the first layer some time to dry, you can apply a second coat a little bit heavier than the first one, just to give that clear some thickness. After the second coat is dry, you can start to lay down your third coat. This will be a heavier and what can be called a wet coat, as it will look wet on the surface and level itself out a bit, which is what gives us our nice glossy look. This can be achieved using a spray can as seen here. Or, if you are mixing paint, you can gradually use more and more thinner to help your clear coat level out as you progress your layers of clear. Like your paint, if you're not content with 3 layers, you can continue to add layers of clear until you're happy with how it looks. Better to do many thinner coats than too many heavy ones, as you can get paint runs and bulges if your clear is too heavy. Now, you just need to give the clear a few days to dry. I had a friend tell me once, if you can sniff the paint and you get a paint smell, then it's not dry yet. Different paints will have different cure times, so be aware of what type of paint you're using. I typically give a clear coat 3 full days to cure. With a little bit of inspection and some good layering of your clear coat, you could actually call this one done if you are happy with the results. If you don't have decals and just a solid body color, then you may be okay with the results at this stage. But let's take this one more step further. You can now sand the body smooth to work towards that mirror-like finish. You can start with a 2000 grit or a 3000 grit depending on how hard your gloss paint cures. Just remember, the lower the grit, the more likely you will have some deeper scratches. Using some water will help keep sanding dust down and keep your sponge from getting all clogged up. As with sanding the filler, you really don't want to use a lot of pressure. Keep your touch light and try to keep movement in similar direction to ward off deep scratches. You want to make the surface as smooth as possible here. If you have an orange peel effect to your clear, then the sanding is quite important. You want to sand to a point where you can no longer see any glossy parts. When you have decals, you can see a raised line between the decal and the body color because the decal does have some thickness to it. Carefully, you can sand this smooth so that you no longer see a definition between the decal and the paint color. Once you have all that done, you are good. Check your work often, as you don't want to sand through the clear coat and into the paint or the decal. If you know something is going to be rough, it can be helpful to add a few more layers of clear and start the process again. This sanding is a very important part of the process. If you have this step done to a decent point, then everything afterward is actually quite easy. You can see here on the trunk that there is a little more shrinkage with that filler. We can see if we can sand that out and still have a nice flat surface. The second side was a little bit deeper than the first, and it looks like we can't get rid of that depression entirely. But with a good polish, we may be able to hide it pretty good. I didn't want to sand too much for fear of sanding right through the clear and into the paint. Once you're happy with the sanding and feel that you have everything all flat, then we can move forward with the polishing. Like every other step, there are many products out there for this process. You should experiment with different products until you find the one that works right for you. Polishing is really for getting out the scratches from your sanding step. How much sanding you do will greatly affect how much polishing you need to do. If you sanded using a 3000 grit and a 5000 up to a 10,000 grit, then you really won't need to do a lot of polishing. If you only sanded using a 3000 grit, then you can use polishing to work at removing all those scratches. Also, scratches will show up a lot more on colors like reds or blacks than they do on colors like yellow or white. When you are polishing, it's a good idea to try and focus your eyes on the surface of the paint and not the reflection in the paint. This can help you identify the scratches and to work on polishing them out. To help with the polishing process, you can use a rotary tool with a sponge or a polishing wheel. This can greatly speed up the process, but I would not recommend using one on a surface with many difficult curves or with a lot of details. Polishing tools are great for large flat surfaces with very little chance of them to burn through the clear into the paint below. Check your work regularly and don't hold the polisher in one place for any length of time. Like with sandpaper, you can use different levels of polishing compound to get a more and more clear finish. Tamiya offers polishes from coarse, fine, and then to finish, eventually giving you that absolutely mirror-like finish. So we are close to the final product now. We just need to finish off some details. Adding some panel lines can help to give depth to your car body. Window trim is often scribed right into the model car body, so now you need to mask that off and paint them. You can paint the window trim before you're clear, but much of the time you want a semi-gloss or a flat to your trim to simulate rubber, and generally rubber is not very glossy. The nice thing about having a fully polished body done before you spray your window trim is that any overspray can usually be polished out with a touch of finishing compound. No effect to your bodywork, and keep that awesome shine. We can finish off this body by painting the lights. Much of the time, lights are a separate piece, but on small cars like Hot Wheels, the lights are usually part of the body. There are many techniques to achieve different light looks. In this one, we just used a little bit of metallic black for a base to give a smoked look, and then cover the lenses in a gloss in the front and a clear red gloss in the rear. Remove the tape, combine the chassis to the body, and you are done. Thank you so much for following along with this guide on painting fundamentals. By using these basics, you can try different products and brands and achieve that mirror-like finish on your model cars in any scale and in plastic, resin, or die cast.